long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, the special edition.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 14. We're back, a dinosaur story. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, John Llewellyn. Hello, John.
Hi. So I don't know. So that was my joke, I guess if it's a joke, referencing the movie We're Back, a Dinosaur Story. It's just this like weird compulsion I have. Whenever someone says, we're back, or if I see we're back, I have to go, yeah, dinosaur story. So if we've done that joke before, that's my fault and not Robert's. So,
yeah, well, it's my fault for doing it.
Send all of your complaints to the Sun, because I don't want to read them.
Exactly. Well, it's also, we discussed this beforehand, so really it is my fault, because you already admitted we already discussed that we might have said it before.
I mean, it's my fault, because I said, like, I have to do this every time, but go ahead and do it anyway.
It's both of our fault. I will take responsibility as the producer of this podcast.
That's fine.
You can send all your, yes, please send all your complaints to the Sun, because John don't want to read it. It's all right, we can still call you John. I know you locked down your Twitter this week.
Well, so I've got, I'm on the job market, as they say, and, I don't have anything that controversial on my personal Twitter account, maybe just some light cursing. It'd be better if prospective employers were directed to my, to the material that I'm sending them, and not, if they try to, like, Google me or whatever, and they find me on Twitter, that they are not like, wow, this guy talks about basketball and Star Wars a lot.
And he likes his hip hop mixtapes.
Is he writing his dissertation or not?
Yeah. He likes his hip hop, his Star Wars, and his basketball.
Yeah.
But I was like, we could call you Johnny Star Wars or something.
It's soccer? Yeah, I don't know.
Johnny Star Wars here with all your great Star Wars news.
Oh, I know. I mean, I was when I was thinking about those Lando figures that we talked about weeks ago about whether I would get any. I was like, am I going to bring these into work and like have these in my office? And am I going to be like become like that person, like the guy in the office? He's got his Star Wars action figures on his desk. He's that guy. Like I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I know. It's this whole thing where it's like, you start a podcast about Star Wars and all of a sudden you're like the Star Wars guy. People like have questions and
which is fine. But I also feel like that's a very like 1990s, like late 80s, early 90s thing to have like or all this like all these toys at your desk, like koosh balls or like that sparking Godzilla or like a boxing nun puppet or something. Like I feel like tons of people did that, 20 years ago, and not so much anymore.
Yeah,
now you just get a blank wall and like a manila envelope that doesn't even have your name on it. I don't know.
Yeah, I did notice my wife came home with a box full of like a stuffed Fozzie Bear that I bought her and a couple things, and it's like I bought her like a Cletus Simpsons figure, and I'm like, what's all this? We're reorganized.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of room for this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I kind of took it personal that I went and saw her desk, and it's like, no, there is no room, because that's the modern office. They just shrink you and shrink you and shrink you, so your flair. Although I would say I've fallen heavily for the flair recently because of all this Star Wars stuff that has inundated in the stores. It's like this thing where it's like I went from getting rid of all of it to like, well, I'm not going to be buying all these figures, or what I hope, knock on wood. But I was at Costco on Sunday or whatever. I bought it's 80 degrees, 85 degrees here right now. I bought a fleece Darth Vader throw, I bought, I was at Target and I was like, oh, maybe I should get this Star Wars cup. It'd be a good thing to put my water in when we do this show. Like I need a brand.
Sure.
I need branded merchandise. I mean, I've been buying those. Target it has a lot of these retro looking Star Wars shirts that I like. And I needed some T-shirts when we were going to Hawaii last year, and so I bought a bunch. But I tell you, those shirts, like, I get more like comments on those shirts than like anything. And usually I just wear black T-shirts, but people are always like, "That thing's so awesome," and they make you think that you're wearing some retro shirt. When it's like I bought it at Target like a month ago, dude. You can go get. They've got a stack of them. I remember one time though, there used to be a guy that, this is 20 years ago. He had a Bantha Tracks T-shirt. They used to come into the place I worked all the time and shop. And he had an original, like, the Star Wars fan club Bantha Tracks shirt. Now that was
right.
That was cool. But now it's much. You don't have to dig as hard.
Yeah. Well, like you said, like they just, and not just Star Wars, but old 7-Up T-shirts or Marvel or whatever. Like they just print them for cheap and sell them at Target now.
Yeah, and I buy them. Although I do draw the line. I'm not going to wear any more Metallica T-shirts. I think I might be slightly too old for that.
You don't see many of those anymore, or at least I don't.
They do. They have them at Target. That's the thing. It's like, going and spending a ton of money on them when I was a kid, and now I could just go to Target.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means, though. Wearing a Metallica shirt in 2015. It's kind of like the idea of like John Cusack always wearing Ramones T-shirts. In movies and interviews, and like, oh yeah, John Cusack, he doesn't play by the rules. He listens to the Ramones. It's like, I bet you now, you could probably, maybe not in the last 5 years, but in the last 10 years, you can find an interview with him and he's wearing a Ramones T-shirt. Which I think when him and Tim Robbins used to make stuff, I think Cusack would wear the Ramones and Robbins would wear the Fishbone shirt.
Sure.
Why am I off on this? I need to put a post in there.
I mean, you are touching on something that this kind of merchandising, marketing, finding stuff in stores that we'll put a pin on that. We'll get back to it later.
Yes.
But, somewhat serendipitously, or not, depending on whether I use that word correctly.
Let's hope you did.
We said we're back at Dinosaur Story. We have a dinosaur story of sorts to lead off. It was confirmed that Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow is going to direct Episode 9. Which, right, this was a rumor, so we sort of knew about it, or we've already reacted to the possibility, I guess. But did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen Jurassic World. I did see his first one. Was it Safety Not Guaranteed? Yeah,
I've seen that one as well.
I think I didn't research him too deeply. I'm wondering, he must be like a Seattle guy or something, because there's a lot of, he filmed a lot of that in Seattle at least. Maybe the writer or something. I don't know. I kind of get the buzz on the street as far as the people, the movie writer types that I follow on Twitter. They're not too excited about this. It's kind of like he kind of has the. People thought that the Jurassic thing was kind of workmanlike. It didn't have a lot of style or pizzazz. So this might be a situation where it's, I think I might even have said this already, where it's like, that misconception that at least I had about Richard Marquand, who directed Jedi, about how he was just kind of a foil for Lucas or whatever. And I think some people are thinking like, oh, well, maybe Trevorrow's is going to be a foil for the whatever they have to correct by the time they get to that third movie in the trilogy, that they go, we all know how much energy they've put into this first one, and nothing's guaranteed, but we're thinking it's going to be good, but who knows?
Yeah, that's the hope, or at least competently made, I think, is where I...
Yeah, and then the second...
because, I mean, we've spent so much time talking about, like, J.J. Abrams and everything, and, like, I think he's fine. I don't know that he's... I haven't seen too much of his work, but what I have seen, like, I wasn't astounded. I thought it was good, but I wasn't astounded. But anyway, so that's all.
No, I mean, that's totally appropriate, because it's like, yeah, J.J. Abrams seems like a kind of a workman-like guy. Like, he seems like he's he's a...
Who knows? Maybe he's just been waiting his whole life to make a Star Wars movie, and that this is his masterpiece.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, everybody says that time will tell, because they thought, a lot of the ideas that he had for Star Wars, he might have used up in Star Trek. Because it was like,
I hope not.
Yeah, I know.
If his ideas were Star Wars included, like, alternate timelines and wormholes or whatever, like, I don't know that I want those in Star Wars.
Yeah, let's hope that's not in the plan. God, that would be terrible. You're just like giving me...
That would be so bad. Like, I spent like an hour the other day thinking about that. Like, oh, please don't put any of that stuff in Star Wars.
Well, that's how they did the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I know. Like, oh no, yeah.
There are actually different versions of Han Solo.
Yeah, not even the EU has ever touched on time traveling, as far as I know. I think that's kind of verboten. Knock on wood again. So yeah.
But yeah, but to get to what you're saying, the article that at least the one that I read that talked about Colin Trevorrow, one of the things it mentioned was that at least Spielberg loved working with him on Jurassic World. But the reason being that, and I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was something along the lines of, like, he, meaning Colin Trevorrow, like, he has a vision as a director of what he wants to do, but at the same time, he's not so rigid that he doesn't take notes from the producers or the studio or whatever. So I think it's exactly what this dynamic that you're talking about, where, they're basically just bringing in someone to, tie up the loose ends. And all right, this thing has already been put in motion with, the Lucas Story Group and Simon Kinberg and Kasdan and, whatever other writers are still around. And we just need a guy who will come in, wrap up this trilogy so that we can move on, and maybe that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the other thing that strikes me about that is that, I mean, that's essentially why Josh Trank got fired from the Boba Fett movie, I think. Isn't it? That he didn't play that role on the Fantastic Four movie, right? And he's now being a little more public with his complaints about interference or whatever, and he's like, oh, the movie that I made was great. I don't know what this is, and who knows whether that's true.
Yeah, I mean...
But given that, I think they were like, all right, this isn't someone who's just going to sort of do what we want, so let's get rid of him, and let's look for people now who will do that, and Trevorrow was one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I guess... Well, I mean, Kinberg was a writer on that Fantastic Four movie.
Right.
Which... Right. Basically, I listened to the Slash Filmcast, which they did a show on that, and they savaged it. I mean, the Fantastic Four was the worst.
It's supposed to be terrible.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. It's like just not even worth. Like, just the logistics of it, and I mean, I don't know if they spoke a lot about it being, I know that they had refilmed a bunch of it, but yeah, I mean. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to not want to deal with a lot of our tours, Not that this guy, not that this, Trevorrow, which, it's funny because he kind of got to start doing indie stuff, but where you have all that control. But in Rian Johnson,
I mean, they are to a certain extent, right? I mean, I think J.J. Abrams, probably not, but you could argue, he is certainly having a lot of say over the direction and the look of how these things go. And then Rian Johnson is probably the closest to sort of an auteur, the closest thing to an auteur that they'll probably hire, for these. But then, then for wrapping up the thing, they're just like, all right, we're just going to wrap this up.
Yeah. I mean, every indication is that, on a personal level that, Trank was kind of a loose cannon and not necessarily the easiest guy to work with. And when you've got if we look at the holistic thing of that is Star Wars in 2015, it's not just a $200 million episode 7. It's $100 million offshoot movie. It's a $4 billion park retrofit, the expansion. So it's like, they're like, this is a huge machine that's rolling. And if you're going to be a problem, they're just like, there's other fish in the sea. They're going to dump this guy. They want team players. It's like this Trevorrow, which every time it sounds like something like a talking dog to me. Trevorrow. But, if he can successfully reboot a franchise that people kind of essentially thought was dead, he can do the third entry in a Star Wars movie. It's right. It's like nobody thought that. I think Jurassic World was on people's list of biggest bombs of the summer. It was like people start doing their fantasy football version of the box office, and I heard a lot of people think, look at the cast. I mean, except for Chris Pratt, it's like the casting seems all wrong, and the story seems kind of bland, and it was a juggernaut this summer.
Yeah. So I mean, the other piece of this too is something that I think we've touched on before, but this idea that even with Marquand, with Return of the Jedi, and with Kirshner in Empire Strikes Back, you had different directors, you had different writers for each film, but there was really only one guy, George Lucas, who had the final word. But now you have whoever's directing, however many writers they have giving input, the Lucasfilm Story Group and however many folks from that group are having input, Kathleen Kennedy maybe, and so it really is more like this old Hollywood studio model that George Lucas initially really hated, and made Star Wars the way he made it in part to sort of break away from that. And so now, but at the same time, that model also did help produce a lot of the things that inspired him, like Flash Gordon, or all these kind of serials, or old Hollywood adventure movies that did help inform his vision of what Star Wars should be. And so it's almost like this kind of paradox of like, this really, where you can say, well, everyone's making nice right now, but 3 years from now, what's it going to look like? 4 years from now, what's it going to look like? Are we going to see people like leaving the Lucas Story Group because Kathleen Kennedy is wielding too much influence? Or are we going to see, Kathleen Kennedy saying, well, Lucasfilm Story Group is doing too much, or, so on the one hand, we can say like, wow, this is a very old style structure that worked in some ways and didn't work in others. And like, there's a reason they moved away from it at one point. On the other hand, though, this is, in some ways, this did help inform like the core of Star Wars. The kind of cinema and TV shows that came out of this model are what did inspire George Lucas on some level. And so it's just sort of interesting to see this come kind of full circle the way it is.
Yeah, it's that old thing where it's like, well, why don't we do things like the way we used to? And then quickly they find out, oh, this is why we don't.
It's like, oh, right. because some people hate working this way.
I mean, I guess Disney I don't understand how these hierarchies work when Disney owns all these different properties and studios and whatnot. But, we've already seen that kind of come to pass with the Marvel. It's like the first, people are like, oh, Iron Man was this huge success, and then Iron Man 2 was kind of critically panned, and then I think that led to Jon Favreau stepping back from either that or being, told, move to an executive producer position on Iron Man. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the Avengers comes out and everybody loves it. And then, they go, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, and people go, is there any, can this studio, do any wrong, even though people kind of forget that, they weren't super hot on the Thor movies. And,
right.
There was the, I don't think Avengers 2 Age of Ultron or whatever was the runaway success they'd hoped. And, they lost, what's his face? Edgar Wright in Ant-Man, which a lot of people thought that was going to kill that movie, but it turned out to be pretty. I think it's performing within.
It did decently. I mean, for an Ant-Man movie, right. What kind of expectations should you have about an Ant-Man movie? But I think it did fine.
And I wonder if this system is set up for them to be able to have not as many people went and saw Rogue One as we thought, because it was confusing to get, people into what is this? It's a Star Wars movie, but no character I've ever seen before is going to be in it.
Right.
And it's it's all this stuff that takes behind the scenes. And they're like,
we're explaining that thing that you may not have thought needed explaining.
Yeah, exactly. It's I
mean, at least for casual audiences, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I wonder. It's how much of this is going to be how much customer or consumer education they're going to have to really do on these things. I mean, we joke about time travel, but these movies are being made in different. They are. We're jumping ahead 30 years, and then we're going to jump back 35 years for the next movie, and then
we're doing a young Han Solo.
Which point might be 10 years before that, and then it was and we also have a TV show that takes place is it 20 years after Revenge of the Sith? I don't know. It's I almost feel, even being a fan, I kind of need a cheat sheet, because I find myself quickly. It's the old joke that I've been seeing popping up. People are going, oh, Rogue One, it's going to be about the Death Star plans. A lot of Bothans died for this information. We're going to find out about that. And everybody's like, no, that's Return of the Jedi. I almost kind of understand the confusion. Because it's I keep thinking, in my mind, I keep thinking that Rogue One takes place simultaneously with Episode 7, which doesn't make any sense. But I don't know. Maybe it's just old.
Well, months ago when we were pitching anthology movies, one of my ideas was to pitch a movie on the origins of the shuttle Tiberium from Return of the Jedi, sort of, I guess, similar to what they're doing with Rogue One, about how did they get the Death Star plans versus how did they get that old Imperial shuttle, right? Maybe that's an interesting story that they want to tell. Not that it is, but that was the joke of it, I guess.
Yeah, and
if I may explain my joke to you, right? But yeah, it's easy to see that confusion of wait, so which Death Star plans are these? Is this? I guess that's the thing when you have two Death Stars. It's you have to clarify, all right, this is the first Death Star.
The only way it could be worse, it could be only worse if they try to retcon that Star Destroyer at the end of Episode 3 is not the same as the Death Star. They had one, but it fell apart.
Oh, I know.
So they can we'll have that.
Prototypes don't always work.
Yeah, this is just a prototype. Yeah. They'll bring it out of mothballs in one of the comics.
It has a laser, but it's just light. It doesn't burn anything. It's just a shaft of light that we just.
It's just for show.
We just make planets slightly brighter than they used to be.
But
so speaking of Rogue One,
yes,
we got what I would say. I mean, we'll get to. There's a lot of big news over the last couple of weeks since we last chatted. But this is probably what I would say is either the biggest news or at least just the one that I care the most about and love talking about the most, which is we got a photo of the main cast, or at least most of the Rebel cast for Rogue One.
Right.
And so let's talk about it.
Well, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it's the short version of it.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's start off. So we also, in addition to seeing the photo of some of them, we also found out about some new cast members that we didn't know about before. Mads Mikkelsen is going to be in this movie. So Donnie Yen, we got a confirmation in this photo that Donnie Yen's in it. Zhang Wen, who I'm sure I mispronounced his name, is in it. Alan Tudyk, and I'm pretty sure I mispronounced his name as well.
Yeah, I think it's
going to do
it's like Tudyk or something like that.
Okay. Well, he's doing a motion capture character. So that's kind of fun, right? It's exciting.
Yeah.
I like all. Well, I haven't seen anything that Zhang Wen's in, but I like everyone else.
Yeah, Alan Tudyk. People will know him from Firefly. He was in the Joss Whedon Firefly TV show and the movie.
Yeah, and see, for those who don't know him from that, like me, he was Pastor Veal on Arrested Development.
Oh yeah, he was.
And he did the voice of King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, and he was also the voice of the main robot in Will Smith's iRobot. So
he does a lot of voice work, I think.
Yes, he does. So it'll be interesting.
And he's good. I think he's good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're like. There's some rumor that he might be playing Cad Bane or something. That he's doing the voice of Cad Bane or the mocap for him.
So on that, I think I hadn't heard that, but I was thinking about Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah,
I mean so Mads Mikkelsen, for those, he's Hannibal, late of TV's Hannibal, but then he was also the chief in the first. Daniel Craig Bond movie,
Casino Royale.
He was the main villain in Casino Royale. Yeah, right. So he clearly looks like someone who would play an Imperial admiral or high-ranking officer. Right. I think he kind of even looks a little bit like the guy who played Admiral Piet in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But I would also say that
he does. He really does.
Yeah. But I also think if you do a little bit of work, I mean, I think he has the cheekbones to play Cad Bane. Assuming Cad Bane's in this movie, like I don't think you would need to do a lot of work for him to play Cad Bane, and so maybe
that'd be interesting.
I'm probably making that up, like you said.
He's got that heavy Danish.
Other folks have been rumored to play that role, but
he's got that heavy Danish accent in every movie, so he's not particularly good he's not particularly good with accents.
You can ADR that though.
Yeah, he was also in like the first of the Clash of the Titans movies. He might have been into both of them.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, we had like this big wig on and stuff like that. He played a good guy in that, so he hasn't always I would say that if you're not a big fan of Hannibal, which I kind of haven't caught up on Hannibal. I only saw the first season, but he's in a movie. Was it Nicholas? Who's he's Nicholas Wilding Redfin or whatever made a Valhalla Rising.
I never knew how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, he made this great movie called Valhalla Rising, which comes and goes off of streaming, and it's it's mostly like a dialogue free kind of thing where he plays like a captured one-eyed slave who goes to the gladiator pits, which are literally just like they put him in a circle and he has to fight somebody to survive. It's a pretty good it's an extremely violent movie, but it kind of shows you that he's got a physicality to him that he doesn't really get to show in Hannibal that might if he's playing like a young Piet, which might be cool. I know that's just speculation. But
well, and that's I only mention that because he looks like that guy a little bit. So he clearly has the look to play an admiral or a Moff or someone. Whoever is like in charge of this movie.
Julian Glover, I think his name is. He's actually on Game of Thrones now. He's been on Game of Thrones for
more Game of Thrones connections.
I know, isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this. It's a little weird, but then also I guess if they're filming a lot of these in England. I think it makes sense to just hire English actors, a lot of whom these days are on Game of Thrones, or Sherlock or whatever. So that's probably why they're doing it. But So in the photo, so back to the photo. So there are a couple of extras in the background, but other than that, we have Riz Ahmed, Diego Luna, Felicity Jones, Zhang Wen, and Donnie Yen. Sort of. Well, Riz Ahmed's not looking at the camera, but everyone else is just kind of giving the camera their best. Yeah, what are you looking at? Kind of look. So, not pictured then are Forrest Whitaker, Mads Mikkel, any of the people we just named, and then Forrest Whitaker, the guy who plays that senator, the guy from Sherlock, I can't even remember his name, right. Senator Jabel, he's not in that photo. So I don't know what that implies for sort of the characters that are playing, because if these 5 are like the core group of rebels that are stealing the Death Star plans, then that implies that all of these other people we're talking about are maybe not peripheral, but they're not like the main protagonists. So I don't know what that means. I mean, especially for Forrest Whitaker now, I'm kind of curious to see what he's doing.
Yeah, I know. I haven't heard any kind of rumblings about what kind of role he's playing. I'm looking at the picture right now, just kind of refreshing. So who's the tall guy with the long hair?
In the back?
Yeah.
That's Zhang Wen.
Okay.
He's an actor from China, Hong Kong. I haven't seen any of his movies, but just looking him up, he seems to have a pretty good reputation. He seems like he's a pretty good actor, and he's been a director as well.
So is he more of an actor, not like a martial arts dude?
I think so. I think he's done a couple movies that have like martial arts components to them, but he's also mostly done like dramas, I think.
I see. Yeah, for some reason I keep focused. He's like, I like this whole looks like he's got like the equivalent of the thing that Jeremy Renner wears in the Hurt Locker for like blast. He has to put that thing on that covers up your face or whatever. It's like he looks like this guy looks like a hard ass. I do see the other guy. It was Donnie Yen. He looks like he might be. He either has like he's either blind or he has like different colored eyes.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and we haven't heard anything about that. But yeah, there's something. I don't know if he's like another species that just has like milky pupils or whatever, or if he is supposed to be blind. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I kind of hope they're not. Part of me kind of hopes that they're not going to do the Zatoichi, the blind swordsman riff. Not because that's a bad thing in and of itself, but just like,
right. It's been done.
Take the Star Wars out of the Star Wars, and it's usually those things are best when they,
right.
When they influence.
So sticking with Donnie Yen here for a minute, for those listening who don't know the photo we're referencing, just Google Rogue One cast photo and it'll come up. So Donnie Yen is seated on the right. Am I crazy? But at the top of his little staff or whatever, does that sort of look like a lightsaber hilt or something that a lightsaber might emerge from? Am I?
Well, it makes me, they do a lot of that, what do they call it, kit bashing when they design stuff. So it's, the lights, if you look at the skiff guards in Return of the Jedi, if you look at the certain way they hold the skiffs, their staff that has a sword on it, actually the staff themselves look just like Luke's lightsaber, and it's like that. Those kind of thematic things get repeated. I mean, we've already established that they have, it used to be, lightsaber can cut through everything, and now they have the concept of General Grievous's guards. They have those plasma things that kind of you can repel a lightsaber or whatever. I could think it might be something along that line, but maybe not a lightsaber.
Yeah, because I was thinking, it wouldn't be like a lightsaber itself, because that would make him a Jedi, and we know the Jedi are all gone by this point, or mostly gone. But, I was thinking it could be, it's a staff, and then he flicks a switch or whatever, and it turns into some other kind of staff weapon that's similar to, some kind of like traditional Chinese martial arts weapon, and that would be kind of cool. That would be something that we haven't really seen before. in Star Wars. So I think that would be really neat if that's what that is.
Yeah, I mean, they could always touch into that concept that was always has always been touched on in the EU, and it's in the comics. The concept of, that there's like the continuum of the Force, and it's
right.
Unfortunately, one of the things the prequels did is they incredibly limited people's view of what the Force is as it exists in these movies, because now it's like, well, there's Jedi, and then there's like 2 Sith. It's like, so there's no people. There's never like somebody. It's like, oh, screw this. I'm not going to be a Jedi anymore. I'm just going to go and do my own thing. That could always be a concept. Like, oh, he was a Jedi, and then he was blinded, and he quit being a Jedi, but he still has
He left the Order.
I mean, there was a deleted scene where that didn't get. It's on the Blu-rays where there's a scene in Attack of the Clones where Obi-Wan is ruminating at some statues at the Jedi Temple, and Jocasta Nu, who is the Jedi librarian, starts telling the stories about the 10 Jedi who left, but she only really talks about Dooku. So there were 10. They made this big thing, like, well, of course it's a deleted scene, so they never really use it. Like, there were 10 Jedi who left the Order, and they walked out on it. And it's kind of like, maybe it might be something that he might be one of the 10 Jedi or something.
Yeah. Well, and they've done that with Ahsoka and the Clone Wars and Rebels now. So, so they've definitely set precedent for that. It seems odd that they would leave the Jedi Order but then come back and fight with the Rebels, and that we wouldn't have heard about this before, but...
it'll be interesting.
Such is the nature of how they are building and rebuilding this canon stuff now.
Every indicator here is even looking at that, we're getting kind of a Dirty Dozen situation. Maybe some of these people are badasses. They're the guys that don't play well. They're the ones that they don't give these guys X-wings.
Ragtag bunch of misfits,
and those are always my favorite. That's one of my big disappointments was watching Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, which I literally thought, it's just going to be a Dirty Dozen riff. And it's like, okay, it's not, like, that's going to be great. And it wasn't, it was just a lot of talking. And I mean, I love a good ensemble action movie. It's like, like James Cameron's Aliens. I mean, even Ridley Scott's Aliens was an ensemble piece.
And I will say, just looking at this photo, I don't know what it is about the photo, but I'm getting kind of like an Alien, Crew of the Nostromo vibe from this group. I don't know what it is, but it's like, just thinking about that early scene in the movie where they're all kind of like sitting around eating and just kind of like laughing and joking with one another or whatever. Like I could see this group kind of doing that.
And in this
movie,
what's her name? What's the girl's name?
Felicity Jones.
Felicity Jones. She's kind of got that young Sigourney Weaver look to her,
Yeah, a little bit.
Kind of a practical haircut, and she's dressed for, she's wearing layered clothes because she doesn't know what temperature she's going to be.
I mean, she's basically dressed like Han Solo in a lot of ways, with like the low slung belt and the jacket and the fingerless gloves that he had in the first movie, and then I don't think he had again.
Yeah, I think she's a pilot. I get the feeling she flies the ship.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of gloves, so apparently the gloves she's wearing are very, very... They're basically identical to gloves that Boba Fett wore in one of the original trilogy, or maybe both original trilogy movies. It's like if you... Paul Bateman, who we've mentioned, he's an artist who worked with Ralph McQuarrie years and years ago, and he sort of still keeps his hand in Star Wars stuff. But he pointed this out on Twitter, that if you zoom in on her gloves, if you ignore the fact that they're fingerless, essentially, but the design with that like big circle on the back of the palm and everything, it's essentially the same gloves that Boba Fett wore. And there were rumors that a couple of weeks ago that her character would be Boba Fett's daughter, which I think is dumb. And like, it's clearly not true. because this doesn't take place long enough after, right? If we're being charitable and saying that he was like 14 in around the time of episode 3, right? If this is 20-ish years later, not even 20-ish years later, given her age in this movie, he would have had to have a kid like right then in episode 3. And we know from the Clone Wars that he didn't, or at least they haven't shown us or whatever. So, there's no way that is Boba Fett's daughter.
Yeah, and knock on wood, cross my fingers, do the 2 steps backwards or whatever. Yeah, it's not that, because it just, why do you have to Forrest Gump everything? Why does everything have to be?
Yeah, exactly.
Why does everything have to be interacted?
I think more likely the designers, were going back looking at the original designs. They saw this little detail that maybe, it's the Boba Fett armor is clearly recognizable, but this is a part of his costume that like people don't pay as much attention to. So like, oh, let's replicate the gloves, right? This is a particular brand of glove that was popular in the galaxy at this time, and just give those to her because we think they look cool.
Well, and also now that I'm really looking at this photo, I noticed that who's standing behind her with the gun? I forget his name.
That is Diego Luna.
Diego Luna. He's essentially wearing Han's Hoth gear, but it's blue, which is like there was this big argument I saw online about a month ago about how everybody thinks that Harrison Ford's coat is blue in thing, and it's the black gold thing all over again. That it was actually a very dark brown, but somehow the way it filmed against the thing, it was actually looks very blue, and then it was exacerbated.
Yeah, well, there's kind of a bluish tint, especially out in the outdoors in Hoth.
Yeah,
scenes. There's kind of like a bluish tint to some of those, so I can see that.
And it was exacerbated by the figure was blue when it came out,
right?
And which and I also see that the guy way back in the back, he's wearing a very similar kind of the Hoth goggles in a dark blue.
Yeah.
So it's like these,
but even though they're clearly on a jungle planet where you would imagine it's like steamy and humid and
there's palm trees, because didn't we see a shot of like the original stormtroopers coming off a ship?
Yeah, I don't know if this takes place on the same planet, but yeah, we saw overhead footage a couple weeks ago of them filming a scene from Rogue One, which I think was the set that they brought over from The Force Awakens. And it was a beach with palm trees and everything.
That's weird.
But I don't know that that's the same planet as where we are.
That's going to be that'll be weird. Palm trees, really?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like it. It's something we haven't seen in Star Wars before. And depending on how they treat them in post with digital enhancements or whatever, it could be neat.
I mean, a true ensemble is definitely something we've never seen, because a lot of it, a lot of the original trilogy is in our minds. We think of it being, we're the ragtag group. They're Luke, Leia, and Han are literally only together maybe 10 minutes of screen time,
right?
And people think it's.
I mean, even if
the trash compactor.
Are you counting when they're in the Millennium Falcon, like and
moping,
and regurgitating?
No, I guess that. So maybe 15 minutes.
Sort of
15 minutes of 6 hours plus of movies, though. Yeah, like they run around. Well, actually, that's funny. It's the trash compactor, the cell block.
Yeah.
They go up the hallway.
And then the scene at the end.
They split. And then and then in Jedi, there's they all come down on the shuttle together, and then they go their separate ways. I mean, it serves the story, of course. I was thinking, one of the great, not great, but a really good ensemble movie which shows what you can do even with a limited budget. Which is kind of, there was a movie that came out a couple years ago of the Riddick series. The Chronicles. Universal did this $120 million Chronicles of Riddick movie that tanked in the box office, but the movie itself did so well on DVD that they went ahead and let them do like a $50 million version of it, and it's a very small action based ensemble type action sci-fi movie, and it's like if they could do something even better than that, then I would be pleased. Because it's a lot of tough dudes and tough girls, and you know, I don't know. I'm actually this picture for some reason. Even though I was online reading Facebook comments, people were just mad about it, like angry, like this is not my Star Wars, and you know, this is, you know, it looks too dark. We're not making aliens. Yeah,
but I will say I didn't get angry about it, but there are a lot of, you know, browns and grays, a lot of earth tones, which, I mean, on the other hand, when you do get the reds and the blues on the different costumes, like, it makes those colors pop a little more, which is, you know, helpful. But the other thing I'll say is, like, I'm not really, I mean, other than the kind of Hoth jackets, I'm not really seeing a clear design connection to episode 4, with any, like, so there are these two big engines in the background that I think, you know, harken back to episode 1 in the pod race, if anything else. But then, you know, I'm just picturing the scene at the very end of the movie of episode 4, you know, the, you know, medal ceremony, where you have those rows and rows of rebel fighters, you know, standing at attention or whatever. Like, none of them look like this. Like, I'm having a hard time putting this group of people into that crowd scene, into that scene. And so it's, I mean, they kind of need a way to explain, like, why they weren't there or why the people there, you know, maybe those were their, like, dress uniforms, but it seems like, I don't know, like, maybe they were their dress uniforms, or maybe, you know, not everyone can make it to the ceremony, but this group, you know, they're this, like, they pop in to resupply, but then they're usually off on adventures elsewhere in the galaxy. And, you know, the Rebel is just these pockets of small groups. And so sometimes they're at the Rebel base and sometimes they're not. And so, like, groups like this maybe weren't there at the time of the ceremony. But that's all kind of like, it's not quite retconning, but it's that, like, well, the thing you have to remember is, it's like that kind of rationalization that starts annoying me a little bit.
The Dave Filoni, you have to remember. But, well, you know, it's funny because Rebels is kind of that. I mean, are they reattaching, coming at this story, a very similar story in a different way? You know, there was the Siege at Lothal story was the whole idea that Kanan was annoyed that they were like, oh, we're joining a group now. It's like, I thought we did things on our own. And if that's what we're getting here, we're getting, like, you know, these guys are, you know, these guys all either guys have no choice, which would, although, you know, if the rebellion is sending people on suicide missions, then all of a sudden it becomes an idea where it's like, wait a second, so was the rebellion just as crass as the Empire? It's like they just use people for their own.
Well, but they had a cause.
They had a cause, you know.
They had a cause, Robert.
My family. I'm doing this for my family. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. It'll be.
I mean, you do realize I hadn't thought about this, but I wonder, like, okay, was this group of 5, like, were they in an autonomous group who joined the rebellion together and they just kept working together, or is this, like, you said, that, like, ragtag group of misfits who, like, maybe a couple of them had worked together before, but they had never flown with Felicity Jones before, and she never worked with this guy before, and, you know, so is this, like, 5 people flung together for this one mission, or is this a group that sort of has been working together for a while, and they're like this well-oiled machine of getting things done?
Yeah. Well, that's, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what.
So, do you want to talk about the Diego Luna question?
Well, I just, for some reason, this is the first I looked at these notes, and I just realized that I'd never seen that before, and I'm very curious now.
Right. So, for those of you who, like Robert, haven't heard this before, if you look at Diego Luna, he's got a mustache, he's got a 5 o'clock shadow, maybe, and he's got a haircut. Some people are speculating that he is playing Biggs Darklighter, who was seen briefly in episode 4, where he's Luke's boyhood friend from Tatooine, who he worked on some ship for a while and then left and joined the rebellion.
The Rand Ecliptic.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the EU says.
Biggs Darklighter had a mustache. Diego Luna has a mustache here. They're both white-ish, or but sort of white ethnic looking. So people are kind of taking that and running with like, oh, maybe Diego Luna's like Biggs Darklighter. Which if he is, that might be fine. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's
it all depends on
interesting
what to do with him, I think.
Because if you really think about it, you see very little of Garrick. Is Garrick Hagon, I think, is the actor who. We always think about him because we've seen those deleted scenes, but really his participation in episode 4 is, well, up until the special edition, he was wearing a helmet. You could see his mustache, and for some reason you would be like, wait a second, like him and Luke are way too friendly in this thing. Like, how do they know each other so quickly? It's like, and then they finally, one of the things they did fix in the special edition that I approve of is that they introduce him and you see him, and which is, I don't know. I mean, that would be cool. Right. I mean, I think it might probably, what we're looking at is more of, it probably fell into a style, like the Boba Fett gloves.
Yeah.
And, in this era of the Empire, men wore mustaches and that's how they cut their hair or whatever. That kind of idea that, Harrison Ford had he kind of had, everybody kind of had slightly pointy sideburns in the Empire, and, everybody had sideburns and a shag haircut. And then 5 years later, it's like, styles change. So it just might be it might just be a nice visual harkening back, trying to put us in mind of like, although it's pretty obscure because I think your average rank and file viewer is not gonna even make the connection. So maybe I'm giving them credit for being too subtle. I
mean, they don't necessarily have to either, I guess. They'll just like, oh, that's interesting, or they'll be like, oh, his name's Biggs Darklighter. I mean, I guess if he is Biggs, then I wonder if he is the pilot. He certainly isn't presented in this photo that way. Maybe he's like the navigator.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, but yeah, all we know of him and from episode 4 is that he's just an X-wing pilot. So given that, if he is Biggs, I don't know what that means for his role within this little group of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually mentioned when we were pitching stories that weren't told. I think I was the one that said that I would actually like a Biggs Darklighter centric story. So maybe I'm getting it.
Yeah,
it'll be. Yeah.
It's I mean, all of the costumes I think look great. Like I said, I don't see a lot of connection to episode 4, and what I think of is like what the rebels were wearing in episode 4, but. Just taking on their own terms, I think they look really, really good.
And we didn't really, to be honest, though, if you think about it, we didn't really get to see a lot of Rebels. Basically, the first scene of Star Wars, Princess Leia is a part of the rebellion, but that's her royal, royal guard with those goofy hats. Those are like Alderaanian militia or honor guard or whatever. And then later on, when they get to Yavin, like, of course they are still wearing the goofy hats. But which would make, if she was trying to hide the fact that she was a rebel, why would all of her guards be dressed as rebels or something like? Oh well, I guess we're going to get taken over. I guess we might as well change into our rebellion costumes. But
I mean, I guess a lot of people working on the Death Star had similarly dumb hats, but.
Yes, those.
So maybe, like you said, it was a style at the time.
It was the style.
So the last thing is, and this is again fortuitous with our opening, but the movie is now, it's no longer called Star Wars Anthology: Rogue One. The movie is now called Rogue One: A Star Wars Story.
Which is hilarious.
So
considering I just changed the name of our podcast because I felt like we weren't showing up when you search on iTunes for Star Wars podcasts. So I actually realized, well, what do all the Star Wars podcasts have in common that we don't have? And it was like they all had the word Star Wars in their title. So I put we changed the name. Well, it's not a colon, but I said Talking Bird parentheses. A Star Wars podcast. Which is kind of like, oh, geez.
I mean, so I don't know if they're rebranding then the Boba Fett movie in the same way. If they're like Boba Fett, a Star Wars story, or something like that.
Yeah, now it's getting a little messy. I find it really interesting that they're so have not solidified that third movie, the one that they've not the Boba Fett movie or the Obi-Wan Kenobi. I wonder if that's because they're in some kind of negotiation.
Well, they announced that, I think they confirmed that they are going to go forward with the Boba Fett movie, and now it's scheduled to come out in 2020. But they basically were like, we're still doing the Boba Fett movie. Josh Trank has no involvement in it. So they were just like twisting the screwdriver in his back a little bit. They're like, oh, it's not that we're not making this movie anymore. We wanted to make this movie. We just absolutely did not want this guy working on it.
Yeah. The one thing.
So now 2020 is, I think, the projected date for it.
The one thing I will say about Josh Trank is not really knowing a lot about him. It does say a lot about these rumors that we've heard about him, his behavior, that, a movie that he probably has some financial investment in still comes out and he undercuts it like that on Twitter. It's just kind of like, dude, it's like the whole thing with, I keep thinking back when Shia LaBeouf, earlier in his meltdown, when he badmouthed Crystal Skull, to some article, and like Harrison Ford kind of said, you don't knock the product, you keep that stuff to yourself, kid.
Well, and it's
Although, I mean, I don't think whether or not he said anything good or bad about it, it's not going to save that turkey.
Yeah. So, exactly. So that's a good transition point, I think, to one of the other, the next big story from the last couple of weeks, which is the Entertainment Weekly. I was going to say stories, but it's turned into sort of like a series of articles and interviews, whatever, that have showed up in Entertainment Weekly in the print magazine and then online as well. Just sort of talking about The Force Awakens and giving a little more detail about it. So we were talking about these standalone movies. Apparently, the standalone Han Solo movie was in development before The Force Awakens. Larry Kazan said something about how he had been working on that movie for years, or it was in the works for a while before they started doing Force Awakens, which I thought was interesting. And now it kind of raises questions about the timeline of the George Lucas decisions, and were they already thinking about going forward with this as kind of like a young Indiana Jones analog, or when exact how soon after Disney got it did they contact Kazan, or did Kazan contact them about hey, I want to make a young Han Solo movie. What do I need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, was it part of the Star Wars, the pre-scripted Star Wars TV live action show? Was it like an arc? The idea of it's bounty hunters in the underworld of Star Wars. It makes me wonder if maybe that's part of the Rogue One situations, that maybe they bought all those. I think Ronald D. Moore had a lot to do with that. I think we talked about that before. Maybe they're pilfering the best, story arcs from this Star Wars Underground or whatever their series that was. Lucas kept saying he was, I've got 120 episodes written, or but they're all just sitting in a vault. I'm wondering if they actually are using all those, the third season they'd have a 5-episode arc about the people that stole the plans for the Death Star. Oh, and then maybe the second season would be we'd have an arc about the origin of Han Solo, that kind of thing. I wonder if maybe they've gone back and they're turning these individual 3 movie. We'll have a Boba Fett run at some point. And maybe that's what they're doing. They're turning these TV ideas into movies. And so that would
mean I mean that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that could be.
I mean, Lucas has always been very cagey about he outright lies about timelines of when he thought up stuff and what his intents were. I mean, like the whole thing that they're saying now, like, he wanted to do them, but he was so hurt that people didn't like his prequels that he just didn't have the heart to do it. And I don't believe that. I believe that he was looking to get married and probably start another family, and he was 70 years old, and he was probably like, these Star Wars movies on my time frame, if I have to oversee them, could take 15 years because they're not. They
cancel Clone Wars. That's a good time to kind of bow out.
Yeah,
move on. I mean, the other thing with him that we've also discussed before is like he can never just throw an idea away. If he has an idea, he's going to use it at some point. And so, we know we had heard that when Disney bought Lucasfilm, part of the deal was that Lucas would get to pitch what he thought the sequel trilogy would be. Man, I'm all over the place today. when Disney bought Lucasfilm, that Lucas would get to say, okay, here's what I think the sequel should be. But maybe we haven't heard, and maybe what happened was that then they also basically got the rights to, or he pitched them his other ideas from the show, from the Underworld show, or just in general that they maybe did accept, and they did start incorporating.
Yeah, because I've been hearing again that, I don't know, maybe this is one of the EW things, Entertainment Weekly things I've been kind of just picking at it. I haven't really sat down and read any of this.
Yeah, same here.
Sometimes it's like third hand, like I'll be on a blog and find out that like, oh, this is the EW article that somebody's just republishing.
Right.
That basically there was some talk, maybe it was JJ, that Lucas's ideas for the sequel trilogy were only nebulous at best. And this whole idea that, they didn't want my idea, is because he didn't have much like his history. If you've read biographies about, is that he likes to pretend that he has all this stuff. Well, it's just it's really all in my head.
There was always a plan in place,
but it's really he's just he's we have like this,
he's riffing as he goes along.
It's like, my eventually we'll blow up the Death Star. And it's like, that's about as much as he's got in there. It's, it's like the old, script where it just says they fight,
Right.
And you have
then all hell breaks loose. Exactly. And that's the Clone Wars.
Exactly. And then he goes, and everybody, you're a genius, George.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder if the story for the sequel trilogy that he pitched them was just, whatever the one-page outline he wrote in 1977 or whatever, that he's kept in a safety deposit box all these years, and he's like, finally I could show this to someone. And it's just like 3 lines about like Luke does this and I don't everyone else is dead or whatever.
Exactly.
So another that wasn't that big of a piece of news, but I just thought it was interesting. I don't think anyone's really picked up on it, but it just questions, like I said, questions about this kind of transition. But the big thing that people have picked up and that they're promoting is, so Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, that is not his original name. That is not the name he was born with. And B, Ren is a title, I guess, bestowed on him by the Knights of Ren, who we also saw images of. I can't remember if they were photos or if they were just like the concept drawings for them. So that's even more of these like shadowy figures, even more characters to keep track of in this thing now. The Knights of Ren. And I don't know, like on first blush, I'm kind of okay with it. It's one of those things where like I could end up really hating it depending on what they do with them. but just hearing it and kind of seeing them and everything, and just the name, I'm sort of glad that they're keeping it. I think it helps keep this kind of, again, the spirit of a lot of the stuff that originally inspired George Lucas, in that How Star Wars Conquered the Galaxy book, or the Conquered the Universe, or whatever it's called, the author, he keeps using this almost like a refrain. He keeps referring to Star Wars as Flash Gordon fan fiction, because that's essentially what it was on some level. And so, this idea of like this group called the Knights of Ren, I think helps keep that kind of spirit of like these kind of Flash Gordon, Edgar Rice Burroughs, space adventure.
And they can get away.
Feel that so far, like, I don't know that we've really gotten from what we've seen so far.
And we can get away from that idea of the Jedi, the Sith. I think,
right, like you said, there's like thousands of Jedi and 2 Sith total. Right?
And it's like
that's not how realistic.
And it can only be 2. I mean, talk about painting yourself into a corner. It's.
Well, but there are all these other dark Jedi, but they're not Sith. I'm like, well, just say that.
But did he say? Yeah, did he even say that? I think that's kind of the problem. He kind of he halved it. He made it confusing, and it's like, well, yeah, they have to have new. I think in some ways you have to have new enemies. It's the if they just go like, well, it's just going to be the Empire again. Which is kind of what we think, but I think it's not going to be. I think it's something different. I mean, we've already said it's like, are there, is the First Order different than the Empire? It's like, is the Resistance the rebellion? It's, it's like that thing where it's like, hopefully they won't get dogged down too much in political type dogma where it's like, the crawl is like, well, the rebellion defeated the Empire, but unfortunately a tide changed and a guy came and he took it all over, and now Princess Leia is out on her tuchus again.
We get like an 8-paragraph crawl.
Exactly.
Just like... Yeah, I mean, it's... Yeah.
The Grand Visor used his power of veto to veto the bill at the last minute. Ceasing funding for the rebellion.
I think it also sets up this idea that you have, like, kind of the military enemy, or quote-unquote enemy, with, the New Order or the Empire or whatever, and then you have this sort of spiritual force-based enemy. And so you're sort of fighting... or the rebellion, you have these sort of 2 tracks, and eventually I assume they'll meet. But you're sort of fighting this thing on 2 fronts now, whereas before they were kind of unified because you had the Emperor and Darth Vader in charge of the Empire. But now that they're gone, you maybe have this split between the people who are just like the military or the Navy or whatever, who are like, no, we need to build weapons and we need to, recruit a bunch of pilots or whatever, and then you have the Knights of Ren or other groups who are like, no, we need to encourage the dark side of the Force, where, the First Order maybe doesn't even have anything to do with the Force.
Yeah, it's like, when you think about military dictatorships, they tend not to last very long without a charismatic leader, right. Like a... Yeah, I don't want to start listing them because I'll probably get them wrong. But, it's the whole idea, how the military runs North Korea, but then they have the, what's his name? The kid, I
don't remember the current leader's name.
Yeah.
Kim Jong something.
Yeah. Kim Jong-un. It's like, I wouldn't consider him charismatic, but he's a figurehead. He symbolizes, well, actually the father was more of a, he was more of a symbol of the thing, and this guy seems to be more hands-on, and he likes to, centralize his power or whatever. I mean, that kind of stuff has happened in the real world, the idea where you can't just have the military overthrow the government and then expect it to stay together, because it's like there always has to be a commander-in-chief at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, we probably hopefully won't get into too much of that in the actual movie. It'll all make immediate sense. Hope, knock on wood again. I think it's the 3rd time I've said that today. Right. But it's, if they have to sit there and go, Kylo Ren, I told you I would only let you do this if you gave me this. And it'd be like, oh, please. Right. I don't need that. There was also some of this, some article where they were talking to J.J. Abrams about the names of the characters, And I was a little like, I mean, some of it's kind of cute, but also it's a little bit like, maybe they shouldn't be talking about that kind of stuff, because it kind of takes a bit of the fun away about the idea, like, oh, well, I just thought that name sounded good. Like, Hux was supposedly that was a name on a tombstone that J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan saw on a walk or something, and Captain Phasma is a riff on the movie Phantasm, because Phasma is a Chrome, and one of the enemies and one of the bad guys in the Phantasm movies is a silver ball. And Angus Shrim, who is like the kind of the bad, he's the Darth Vader of the Phantasm movies. He was actually on a couple episodes of Alias, which J.J. Abrams produced, and so he's a fan of those. I mean, I love Phantasm. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's like in the canon of that late 70s. Star Wars, Jaws, Close Encounters, and it's like for horror, it's Phantasm, that kind of. Right. Of that era, but just the fact that he's giving these kind of like we don't even know who these characters are, and he's giving away that one, that their names don't really mean anything in the grand scheme of Star Wars. Right. It's like, oh, I just had to come up with a name. That's the kind of stuff. I think that's the kind of stuff you save after the movie's out, and it's either become part of the culture or hasn't. I think you're limiting a certain type of fans. Some of the fun of it is that, like, well, I think we had already speculated on some of the names, and I know that there was some brand. They were worrying about some brand confusion because something slipped out that Daisy Ridley's character, its name was Kira. And I don't know how that happened. Either it was on a notepad or something, and people got this idea like, oh, she's called Kira. And they wanted to bring it out that, like, no, her name's Ray or something. They were very adamant that there was this confusion, and that's why JJ had started letting some of these character names out, because there had already been people saying like, oh, this character's called this, and like, no, you got them all wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's thinking about this, not this particular issue, but this idea that we're getting like, oh, here's J.J. Abrams on the red carpet of this movie that he was a producer on, so let's talk to him about Star Wars, or like, let's do this interview with J.J. Abrams for Entertainment Weekly. How much are we going to be seeing him in the run-up to this movie? And then when it's actually released, how much are we going to be seeing him? Is he, like, at what point does he get tired of doing promos for this movie? Because he's not working on it anymore, and as much as he loves Star Wars, he has other projects going on, and I'm sure he doesn't want this to consume his entire existence. So at what point does he have to say, like, I have other things I want to start talking about? And so I wonder, are we hearing from him a lot now? Because when the movie comes out, they're just going to be, they have all of these actors. They have like 20 actors that they can put out there to promote the movie and to do interviews. So, could be when the movie comes out that we'll be hearing from them, and we won't be hearing from J.J. Abrams as much about this stuff. And so that's why they're like, all right, here are the questions that, he's allowed to answer. And so get him in now, because you're not going to see him again in, December or January.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, because, Star Wars is it's not connected to Bad Robot, I assume, right?
Not that I've heard.
So, yeah, he stepped aside from his production company to do this for Lucasfilm. So then he will step back into his role at Bad Robot. And what is Bad Robot working on right now? The new Star Trek movie. So in some respects, it's like he'll be leaving Star Wars and possibly shepherding in that third Star Trek movie, which, has a real trouble, since they lost their director, and then they lost their next director, and,
and now they have to find somewhere to slot it in between all of these Star Wars movies that are coming out. And so, like, we could see at one point, perhaps, one of the Star Trek movies that he's producing is going to be up against a Star Wars movie, and so he's going to going to have to say like, well, sorry guys, I have to promote my own thing.
Well, it'll be interesting, especially, obviously he's not going to be probably doing the day-to-day creative side of that, but who knows?
Right.
I shouldn't even say that, because he might easily walk back into it and go, hey, I'm going to be back to your Star Trek guy. It's like he's going to have
energized. I have all these ideas that I didn't get to implement on Star Wars.
So it's like, how are you going to make? It's like, but the real trick is, how do you make something? How do you make the experience exciting like Star Wars, yet not Star Wars? Because I think a lot of people aren't. That whole like Star Trek, which is his first take on it. A lot of people were all excited about, he brought Star Wars to Star Trek. Well, I think if he does that now, people are going to be like, he just brought Star Wars to Star Trek.
Right.
Like, we already got Star Wars coming out our ears. I want some Star Trek.
Right.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how hands-on he is in producing any of these things, because he produces so much. And, if he's,
how much of that is just like his name's on it, and how much of that is he's actually in there consulting on stuff.
I mean, I was a big Lost fan for the first 4 seasons, and I didn't really spend a lot of time, listening to stuff about the production. So I just always, with J.J. Abrams' names, I assumed that in my mind it was this J.J. Abrams was running the whole show. Come to find out, he actually had essentially left the production after the pilot episode, even though his name was all over it. And it's just like, Hollywood producers have always had that, how much is it actually them? And, now it's not uncommon to have 10 producers on a big budget movie like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Rogue One has like 6 or 7, I think.
Yeah,
Rogue One, because they announced the crew as well, and they have a ton of producers on that movie.
And it's funny because it goes back to what you were saying about like, well, how long till when there's too many cooks? Yeah,
right.
How is it going to be when they're going to have that vision of Star Wars where there's going to be like, maybe Simon Kinberg's like, yeah, we got to make it a little bit, we got to be able to make the toy, I want some toys out of this one or something,
Right.
We have them show up in a bigger ship, because then we can, do an exclusive.
Right.
With,
let's put Ezra from Rebels in here,
Yeah.
Let's put Kanan in here.
And I'm picking on Simon Kinberg, not that I know anything about him. I'm just had to pick a name, but yeah, then it becomes, well, I guess it's,
well, I mean, he is the guy, I think, in the Lucas Story Group who is bridging Rebels and the films,
right?
Because the other folks whose names I know, they're either kind of just general, like Star Wars knowledge people, like Paulo Hidalgo or Leland Shee or whatever, or they're like specifically working on the book division or the comic books or something like that.
Yeah.
But Kinberg, I think, has his fingers in a bunch of the different Lucasfilm properties.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Lucky him.
Yeah. So this wasn't part of the Entertainment Weekly story, but this was as part of the D23 conference festival. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I don't even know what exactly what it was.
Promotional event. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's a media rollout, right? It's basically like when all the networks do their upfronts, where they like say, "Here are all the great TV shows we've got coming this season," and getting the advertisers to sign on. That's essentially what D23 is.
It's like
for Disney.
It's telling
saying "Oh, look at all this stuff we've got coming out."
It's a subtle way of getting Wall Street investors to invest heavily in Disney, I assume, without actually doing a stockholders meeting.
But we got a promotional poster done by the guy who did the posters, or the one sheets as they're sometimes called, for the special edition and the prequels. So it's John Boyega and Daisy Ridley and Kylo Ren. Or their characters and Kylo Ren, and then Han Solo at the bottom looking kind of confused. I'm not saying this to bag on the artist, but like I'm not quite sure what his facial expression is supposed to convey in this thing.
Yeah.
But the sort of big news or reveal or whatever is that you've got John Boyega wielding a lightsaber, and specifically Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. That is, I'm assuming, is going to be kind of like the MacGuffin of this movie. Or maybe not the MacGuffin, but it's like it's going to get passed around. Like it's the Force Awakens version of the Death Star plans from A New Hope. And when I saw this, I wasn't sure. I was like, well, so did they just tell him like, okay, these are our three main actors, make us a poster, or like how heavily involved was he? But then today I just read an interview with the guy Drew Struzan.
Yes,
is his name. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And so he has a quote here from Movie Weekly. He says, "It started about a year and a half ago. I got a call from J.J. Abrams, who I've never met. Blah blah blah." So about a year later, we get together and meet, and he says we're using all the original people: John Williams, Kasdan, Harrison Ford's in it, etc. So then he says, I got to read the script, and subsequently I've seen half of it. So it sounds like he read the script, and then he had all these different concepts, and then he went to sleep one night and kind of designed the painting in his sleep and did different versions. So, I mean, it sounds like, John Boyega wielding this lightsaber is going to be in the movie. It is going to be in the script. The question, though, is he just like sort of using it for defensive purposes, and he's not, a nascent Jedi, or is he? I think that's the big question about his character now is we thought, oh, maybe, Rey is like the daughter of Han and Leia or whatever, but maybe John Boyega is the new sort of emerging Jedi character that we're going to be rooting for however many movies.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I am not a fan of the poster, and I'm a big fan of Drew Struzan. He's done.
Yeah. No, the other 6 posters.
I mean, my favorite Star Wars poster, which is the Star Wars, they call it the Circus Style, or Style D, I think is what it's called. It's the one that it was my kind of my holy grail Star Wars poster that I have in my office. Mm-hmm. He drew that. There's a great documentary, actually. It's about him. I forget the name of it. It's on Netflix. Totally interesting. Mm-hmm. It's more than just a guy painting pictures. He's had a whole interesting career. This something that was it kind of like, what do they call that, a Dutch angle or whatever they're kind of at.
Yeah,
it's just there's
like a canted angle.
Yeah, it's just something so cheap, and it doesn't convey anything to me whatsoever, which is like I'm not used to that from him, because like I said, I'm a fan of his work, and I was just kind of like, is this something he just tossed off over a weekend or something? I know
right.
It's not the official Star Wars thing, and I don't think it'll be used in marketing heavily. I know it was an exclusive at the D23 thing, so maybe sometimes the quote exclusive stuff, in my opinion, is the crappiest stuff. It's the stuff that's right. like not so bad that it needs to be thrown in the trash, but it's not really good enough to be put. It's not good enough to be put in the on the DVD box or whatever.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the idea that. I don't know. It just doesn't convey. It makes everything, the whole thing, seem very compact and small. Whereas, Star Wars posters are about, to me, have always traditionally been expansive and about wonder. And it doesn't always have to be every single character represented equally or whatnot. But it's always kind of it's like the galaxy. It's trying to think big, and I just feel that this image is just like, hey, here's two people that are in Star Wars, and they may or may not be good. We don't know. Mm-hmm. They might, John Boyega and Daisy, they might suck. I mean, it's like Or they might be awesome, but then it's Harrison Ford looking slightly bemused or whatever, and it's just like...
Well, I think I figured out he just kind of looks like old. Like, he looks so much older in this painting than he does in the trailer that we've seen, right? He looks old and kind of like he's like, you get off my lawn. Like, he's going to wave that gun at you, but he's not going to do anything with it.
Right.
You know, or he's going to try it. It's going to be kind of sad. I mean, I think that's what... And then there's something about Daisy Ridley's mouth, or I guess I should say Rey's mouth. Like, there's something about the coloring of it. It looks bizarre to me. Like, it looks almost like she has a mustache.
Yeah, it's just not a good painting, and it's, you know,
I think Boyega looks great. Like, he nailed Boyega, and you know, Kylo Ren's mask looks neat and everything. But yeah, but I see what you mean. I mean, it feels claustrophobic, right? And I think looking at his earlier one sheets or whatever, you know, you don't get any kind of full body shots of any of the characters. You get like their heads. You know, maybe you get from like the chest up, you know, which means you can make them bigger and they're kind of looming over, but then you have, you know, ships flying around and you have lightsaber duels. Like he just packs so much into these frames, these posters, these one sheets, whatever.
Yeah, it's like
whereas this one here, you get like you get 4 people just standing there, and you see like their full body almost, or you know. In Harrison Ford case, you see, you know, thighs up, and the ships are kind of crammed into the sides. It feels a lot more claustrophobic.
Yeah, there's no action. There's no forward motion. It's like it feels like you're looking at about 2 minutes before they actually decide to go into action. You know, like there's thinking. Everybody's thinking in this thing, and it's just like, you know, for having, you know, obviously I'm speculating heavily. I have this feeling that maybe they came to him, and he's you know, right now he's in his studio and he's working on that one sheet poster that's going to come out in, you know, September, October for the theaters. Yeah. That we're all gonna, you know, well, at least I might buy, but and then they're like, yeah, that's great, it looks great, but we're doing this convention. What can you do in a weekend?
Right.
And I was like, oh, I can do this in a weekend. Oh, awesome. And we'll just give it away. And then it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it just totally smacks of like an afterthought. And I'm just...
I have a slightly different theory, which is that... So I guess it sounds like he presented them with several different options. Right, this was the first one I did, and I went for 7 months doing stuff, and in the end, guess which one they picked? The very first thing I did. Oh. So it sounds like he gave them a bunch of different options, and so, you know, the fact that we're not thrilled with this one, like, that's not totally his fault, because he maybe presented them with options that had more action or, you know, more characters or, you know, more whatever, but that perhaps they picked this one because it conveys the least information. Or at least the least new information, right? Because they're still trying to keep things secret. So, like, okay, we know these are the 3 young lead actors. We know they're going to be TIE fighters. We know they're going to be X-wings. We know it's on a desert planet. We know Harrison Ford is in it. So, you know, when in the process of them deciding which of these posters to go with, they said, like, okay, well, you know, this one doesn't reveal, you know, too much. This one doesn't show the lightsaber battle between these 2 characters, or you know, we want to save the big reveal for this character and for the movie, so we'll just go with this one. That would be my theory, but well, but no matter what happened, you're right. It's not like, it looks fine, but it's not the most inspiring.
Well, and also there's some...
It doesn't match the 6 that he's done previously.
There's some confusion here for me because... So, I guess I'd never really zoomed in and looked at this. I just kind of looked at it on my screen. That if you look in the bottom left, there's a moisture evaporator. Yeah. Like, very prominently displayed, you know, on the... you know, because Jakku is... not Tatooine, right? It just is not Tatooine. Right. Have you seen that meme going around when it's like where it's Montalban, Ricardo Montalban. It says like, it says something like Jakku is not Tatooine, because it's the old thing where JJ said, "Oh no, Khan is not in this movie. Khan is not in this movie." Well, then, so we got the Vaporator, and okay, we know it's a desert planet, so whatever, it can be Jakku. Mm-hmm. But in the bottom right, we're looking at this red, oval, long, elongated oval platform, which is totally Bespin. It's the carbon freezing chamber. Is that a intentional? Is just going for a tone? I mean, it's.
Yeah, and others have pointed that out too. I'm sort of guessing that he dreamt this, and in your dreams you put things together, and so this was his sort of riff on probably what let me back up. I'm guessing what he was charged with is making this poster, but stylistically they wanted something that connected with the original trilogy. I mean, the whole thing, and I'm not the first person to point this out, and you and I have talked about this before too, right? The whole thing with this sequel trilogy is, 7 comes after 6, 7 comes after 6. We're going back to practical effects, right? They're not connecting this to like all of the Star Wars movies. They're specifically connecting these new movies to the original trilogy.
Right.
And so either explicitly or implicitly, when Drew Struzan was sleeping and working on this painting in his dreams, he took that idea, and that's how he got like, moisture evaporators, and that's a very strong design element, and those Bespin things, that's a very recognizable.
I see what you're
feature. Yeah, that would be my guess. Like that's the most benign explanation I can come up with.
Yeah, he just wants to give people that almost, well, not subliminal because you can see it, but in a way, a subliminal message like this is your father's Star Wars. Don't worry.
Right. Now, I will say, if they do end up going back to Cloud City and Bespin, like, ooh, that would, I would love that so much.
Yeah. See,
and Lando wouldn't be there that we know of. At least not in Episode 7, but like, oh man, that would be great.
Well, I mean, it's one of
it's so much.
Well, that's the thing. It makes you wonder. Well, I don't want to be a spoiler guy, but
well, no, I mean, if we spoil anything at this point, it's like unintentional because we're just guessing. Really?
Well, I mean, there's all that rumor about what the story of this is, and the Kylo Ren, and that involves well, we know Luke's lightsaber shows up again, the one that's supposedly lost. Where did he
passed around?
Where did he lose it?
Right.
Bespin. Because I mean, as a kid, I always thought, it's when Luke gets sucked out of the thing and he ends up on the weather vane, that there's like a piece of fluff, and I'm like, is that his hand? And then for years in my mind, it was always, that's his hand. But then I realized there's no, that it's probably a better thing that his hand is at the very bottom of that, whatever, the bottom of Cloud City. So, he's going to have, if Kylo Ren is or not Kylo Ren, but if somebody gets his lightsaber back, that's where they're going to have to go. So it'll be interesting if they do,
that's true.
If they do go. I mean, I haven't heard. I mean, that's an interior set, so luckily you don't. It's not one of those things like, it was filmed in Tunisia, and they're like, they're all in Tunisia. Like, they're back. They're back on Bespin, so they could do, as long as people keep up their non-disclosure agreements. We could be sitting in anticipation all the way to the 18th.
Yeah,
somebody doesn't ruin it, like me. So we're going to talk about theme park.
Yeah, let's talk about theme park.
So that
theme park.
That was the big. Yeah, that was the big. I guess the big meat of the matter.
Star Wars Land.
Is that what they're calling it?
I don't know. I think that's become shorthand for whatever, because I think it's it's a couple of different things. It sounds like that will be around the park, but. For all intents and purposes, they're making a Star Wars Land.
Yeah, I mean, so I saw a fan generated Lucasland drawing of what they thought. And to me, it was like I mean, I commend the amount of work that the person put into it, but you know, I honestly don't think they're going to come up with a Naboo Lagoon, and you know, they're not going to be celebrating the prequels in any kind of Star Wars land. If the prequels themselves didn't inspire people to run out and demand Disney create Gungan and Utapau themed rides, I don't think, you know. It'll be interesting. I mean, I saw the pictures. I mean, they're very nebulous. They're not, obviously some of that means because they don't really.
I mean, because I can't imagine too much of it is actually built yet.
Oh, I don't think any of it is.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're looking at, well, how long does something like that take now? 5 years?
I want to say that I read 2019, but that can't be right. That's too late. That's like at the tail end of the movies that they have planned now.
You think they'd be doing it sooner?
Well, it depends because so let's talk about what they're doing. So they're refitting Space Mountain so that it will now be Hyperspace Mountain,
right?
Where you'll like go through an X-wing battle, whatever. You have we already knew they're refitting Star Tours. Right. Which will now be called Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, which is like we're in Boggy Creek 2 territory with that. There's something where visitors will get to fly the Millennium Falcon somehow. I assume it'll be technology similar to whatever Star Tours is, and or you know a hybrid of that and what we saw Daisy Ridley doing in that. In that behind the scenes trailer.
Oh yeah,
the scenes trailer. You know, something like that. But then they also are starting this recurring seasonal event, Seasons of the Force. And I'll leave it to our viewers. I'll leave it to our listeners whether they want to make the association with Season of the Witch or Seasons of Love, but there you have Seasons of the Force, which, I mean, the only thing about Seasons of Love, whenever I hear that, I think about that great David Rakoff essay about Rent, where he riffs on Seasons of Love, and he's like, it sounds like, you know, some kind of like spice mix that, you know, some kind of like Mrs. Dash analog you buy in the store of like, you know, freeze-dried bacon bits that you know, air puffed toenails or whatever they use. Pour onto your salad.
It's a salad booster.
It's
a salad
booster. Seasons of the Force. So, you know, you got like Yoda pepper and, you know, lemon pepper, Finn or what, you know.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's like a recurring seasonal event. They can, once they get the initial thing set up, they can, you know, have sort of like a this is me speculating, but they'll have like a standing parts to it, but then they'll be able to swap out others to rotate whenever they have a new movie coming up. I mean, the Season of the Force in particular was sort of greenlit to try to preempt or keep up with whatever the new Harry Potter theme park is that's coming out to LA, Universal Studios or something. So, I mean, I would be surprised if they announced this thing and it wasn't built and wasn't ready to open until 2019 when, you know, 3 or 4 of the movies have already come and gone in the theaters. You know, they're not going to be able to make it for Episode 7 and probably not Rogue One, but, you know, maybe by the time Episode 8 comes out, or certainly the Han Solo movie in Episode 9, I would think they would want it ready for those.
Yeah, I mean, they've always, you know, they've retasked, you know, the Haunted Mansion in Anaheim to be the Nightmare Before Christmas. I think some of our like the Space Mountain stuff will be retooling and then of pre-existing and, you know, and Star Tours. I mean,
give it a fresh coat of paint or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really looked at the actual map about where this stuff is. I mean, have you been to Disneyland?
No, I didn't really care enough to look at where it was. I know it's not a Tomorrowland, but that's all I know.
But no, I mean, have you ever been there yourself?
Not the one in California. I've only been to the one in Florida.
it's, you know, and one of the things you immediately is it's a cramped space. It's like, they only have so much room to work. But I was there like 2 years ago, and I was, you know, that place has been dying for some new blood in it. I mean, it's like, I got to see the new Star Tours, which was cool. You know, you get to wear 3D glasses, but it's really the same entrance that they've always had. It's kind of like not super fun to stand around there for very long.
Right.
But that whole Tomorrowland area, it's just kind of like, they retrofitted it for some stuff a long time ago, and it's been that way forever. It's like 20 years or more. It's been like this ridiculous rotating thing where you go and look at like the kitchen of the future, and you're like, okay, or you can watch some, you know, you can play Xbox for 10 minutes. So I mean, that whole area, I don't know if that's the part that they're actually going to use. I mean, they've used so much of their real estate there. I mean, Florida, on the other hand, I mean, they have, you know, it seems like they have unlimited space. And, you know, but even when I was there, I haven't been there for 15 years or whatever, or maybe 10 years. And it's like, you know, they had that 3/4 size AT-ATs and things like, I don't know if they'll if they actually have real estate in Disneyland to do that, but it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm excited. It's like, I assume that the experiences are going to be different at each park, you know, because that's how they like to do it, to get you to give you a reason to have
go to both. Yeah,
to have a little cross pollination. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how long these things take, and you know, they had a pretty good setup in Florida at the I think they called it the MGM studio, which had, you know, which makes the, you know, the amount of stuff they had for you to do, and you know, you could get on a, you know, there'd be like a speeder bike welded to the ground you could sit on and have your picture taken and all this stuff. And I mean, they had a pretty good setup there. I can only imagine what they're going to have now. Although I just can't imagine actually being able to get anywhere near it for like the first 3 years after it comes out.
Yeah. So this is another good segue into, I think, the last thing we wanted to cover, which is just sort of talking about all the marketing promotions that, right, again, Bob Iger was like, oh, you're not going to hear anything until September, but we're already, you know, stuff's leaking out, we're getting news about things. And so there's just all this, you know, it's basically, it's the same as the run up to episode 1, maybe even more so in terms of like how much branded merchandise and marketing and promotions they're doing. I guess the most notable one is the new 3 3/4 inches figures. I don't know if that's the right way to refer to them, but the new figures, only because there's a character that they're putting out there that we haven't heard about yet, which is Constable Zuvio, who, according to the back of the thing, is, quote, a vigilant law officer on a mostly lawless world, tough and humorless, keeps order on a frontier trading post. So, you know, local sheriff somewhere.
I have a feeling he isn't going to be a big part of anything. That's kind of very typical with Star Wars stuff, is that they'll release a figure and you'll think, oh, this is going to be really important, and then it turns out to be like nothing. It's like, I think they talked about this on another Star Wars podcast, that I think that General Maydean or whatever was the mail away sneak peek figure for Return of the Jedi, and he, like, you know, he has like one line in the movie or something like that, and it's just like, he's like, this guy probably like says, hey, you better pay your parking ticket, and then that's it. Right. Some people have kind of freaked out about, like, oh, well, if you look in this, because I'm looking at this, there's a picture that somebody took. I guess Walmart put their figures out early, and somebody got 12 of the figures, and mixed in with the new people is there's a Darth Vader and there's a Luke in Bespin gear, and like people are freaking out, like, oh, it's going to be. But I mean, basically, people have said that, you know, if you look at the numbers, it's like when people request, they say Darth Vader is the number one requested figure that they do. So I think they just want to keep a Darth Vader figure in the in the stable, so to speak, and a Luke and stuff like that, because it's going to be, when they eventually come out with the 61-year-old or 62-year-old Luke Skywalker, in his robes, it's like he's probably not going to be built for action. So they probably want something.
I mean, how well did whatever the original Obi-Wan Kenobi figure sell?
Yeah, he's like,
how much business did they get out of kids buying like an old man?
I know,
action figure to play with.
It's probably my Obi-Wan Kenobi figure is probably still in the best shape of all my Star Wars figures from the original movies, because I probably played with it, zero. It's like, well, because he also dies halfway through the movie, and it's like...
Right. It's like, okay, you fly the plane, and I'll sit here and watch you fly it.
Exactly.
And tell you where I need to go.
I came across this picture of me when I was about 5. It was I think it was my 5th birthday, and I'd gotten Star Wars toys for my 5th birthday, and it was like they were so hard to find at that time that I just had the X-wing and this land speeder. I didn't even have figures. And it was like, I remember finally finding a place that had Star Wars figures, and I'm like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's so boring. He's like, it's like he dies. I can't even play with him because he's dead. So well. Even back then, I liked to keep my further adventures within canon.
Sure.
But,
that's what gives you a leg up on the other children.
Exactly.
But, you pointed out to me, right, they're doing school supplies and they're doing soup. I don't know if these are supposed to be new or not, but today I was at the grocery store. I saw, little lightsaber toothbrushes. Micro Machines is being resurrected for this.
Yeah.
So, as you said to me over email, right, this is just recalling all of the run-up to Episode 1 where you had everything with Jake Lloyd's face on it. And then Episode 1 came out and no one wanted it anymore. And so the promotions push for, or at least the marketing and branding they did for Episodes 2 and 3 was a lot less because people just didn't want to buy it. So, I mean, as you say, they're really sort of gambling that this is gonna work out. That people are gonna go see this movie and want to purchase things with John Boyega's face on them or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, even I'm looking at these figures and it's like, part of me is like, oh, this might be fun to have something for my desk. But I would really only go probably for the stormtroopers, because the sculpts always look better than actual people. Like,
you don't have to worry about like getting the eyelids right or whatever.
Right. I mean, and really, out of all that, it's like, to me, like the only one that really looks cool is the Captain Phasma. Even though I could do with a little bit more silver. They don't do the chrome very well. But also, it has my number one thing I hate in toys is that when you have to buy a bunch to open them up and then to put something together, like a third thing. If you buy the entire...
I think that's optional. It's like to give you bonus toys.
Yeah, but it never feels optional. It is optional, but it never feels optional, because you're always like, well, if I just bought this Constable Zuvio, I could have my whatever it is. I can't see it. It's kind of the resolution.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell from those photos like what. So you take whatever accessory they're given. In Constable Zuvio's case, it's like 2 long pole axes or whatever. And then you like combine them somehow, you stick them together, and then you add another thing, and then suddenly it's like a little snowmobile or something.
I mean, it kind of like, I think it might be a riff on the back in around the time Empire came out. They did a run of toys between Empire and Jedi called mini rigs, and they were all inspired by Star Wars things. There was like a little mini 1-person tank that was supposed to be on Hoth, and then there was a there was like the bounty hunter grabber. It was literally like this. You could put one figure in. It had a thing in the back that you could retract, and it had like a claw that would grab a figure, and it would confine them. And then it had like 2 suction cup legs and like a hook and a poker kind of arm. And like there was like a Bespin personal transport thing. Those were great. I love those. Those were my favorite ones because they were relatively, whereas a X-Wing would cost you $30, these mini rigs were like $7 or $8. So it was kind of like, it was a cheap way for kids to get into it. But the other way, it's like you have to buy. I mean, I don't know. A couple years ago when The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings was out, I was like, I wanted to buy a Gandalf figure for my desk or something because I really liked that character. And I went to Toys R Us and went to go see how much. It's like, how much is a Star Wars figure? Like or a Hobbit figure, like $5. And it was like the buy-in for those were like $15 per figure.
Wow.
And I don't know. I mean, how much of these figures, if these things are going to be like $5 each, that seems about fair. But if they're going to be 10,
yeah.
It's like, I mean, I'm not going to buy a ton of them because I have to keep reminding myself. I'm one of those people that fell for all the episode 1 marketing. I mean, for Christ's sakes, I had a Darth Maul inflatable chair. And it was like, where am I ever going to, I was living in an apartment, like a tiny apartment about the size of yours.
Do you still have it?
Oh, no, I gave it to Goodwill.
Oh, that's too bad.
I could give it away as I could probably cost me an arm and a leg to ship it to somebody. So, yeah. But yeah, no, we had all that. I mean, I got rid of a lot of that stuff because it was like, I lived through the whole E.T. Marketing thing, which, E.T. was the biggest movie of its time, but it had the problem of not being particularly something where you could market it. Like, I don't think a lot of people wanted an E.T. doll because by and large, E.T. was kind of freaky looking. So for years afterwards, you would go to Toys R Us, and it would just be like racks and racks in the closeouts of E.T. extended fingers with like a light in it. You could put a battery in it, and if you pulled it down, the finger would light up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Star Wars always seems to eventually kind of make its money back. I mean, I have a Target really close to my house, and I go in there, and they didn't have they had the Hot Wheels, which, I mean, is there something, there's an actual Micro Machines, or were you talking about?
No, yeah, I read that they're not out yet, but that Micro Machines is coming back. Like, the company doesn't even exist anymore, but they're cranking up. They're opening up the old factory. They're cranking out the old the
pewter,
the old Micro Machines.
The pewter
I don't,
Smith.
Yeah, I don't know what they're made out of this time, but for Star Wars, that this is like going to help launch the company back into children's toy chests or whatever they have now.
This is Star Wars. This is what's going to be. This is the real thing that's going to make America great again.
That's right.
It's like
Force Awakens, which
everybody's going to be employed. Yeah, it's like 25% of our workforce is employed making some kind of Star Wars memorabilia.
Right. Star Wars related employment. So I mean, this is unrelated, but it feels related to me, which is like, is this movie still going to be rated PG? Or like, I could, maybe PG-13 at the most, because I mean, this is relevant because I'm thinking about, all this stuff about like school supplies and soup and Micro Machines or whatever. Like everything we've seen, the trailers and everything that we've seen imply a movie that's kind of dark.
Yeah.
Right? There's BB-8, but other than that, there's not a lot in the movie of what we've seen that screams like, hey, this is a fun space adventure.
It makes me wonder because I mean, the thing is,
it's got to be.
The thing about the MPAA, in my opinion, is that it's a corrupt organization anyway.
Oh, sure.
It's they have their favorites, and I mean, I think a lot of the reason that Revenge of the Sith was PG-13 was that Lucas was perfectly comfortable having a PG-13 movie. And he would, I mean, from the get-go, early, this one's going to be PG-13 because there's going to be a lot of stuff.
It's a very dark themes, and we're talking about this is it. This is bad things happen to him.
I mean, that's when I think about what a PG movie was when I was a kid. I mean, Logan's Run was a PG movie, and there's like full frontal nudity of Jenny Agutter. There's actually a whole scene in a slow motion sex room. People are lit, basically burned alive with lasers and then melted, and it's like it's PG. I mean, I don't know. I think if Empire came out now, it might be PG. I mean, PG-13, but you got to think about what Bob Iger is thinking to himself. It's like, well, if they deliver me a PG-13 movie, then we know that we're going to lose, 10% of our movie viewership. But although PG-13's always been, as much as Spielberg loves to kiss himself on the hand and about how he came up with it, it's always been a bogus rating because it's well, for me, I hate PG-13 because it caused an issue because it came around when I was about 11, which totally, pardon my French, it totally fucked me in my house because all of a sudden all these movies I wanted to go see, my mom was like, "You're 11, it says PG-13, I have to go with you and I don't want to go see this movie." And so it became this whole thing where I had to be like, I had to work out these deals, and I had to, to see Temple of Doom, I had to beg, steal, and borrow. But I mean, I almost think like a conglomerate like Disney, they're easily gonna. I mean, what's the ratings on the Pirates of the Caribbean movie? Those are all PG-13. They have to be.
I don't know, but I would guess so.
But then again, as I'm saying this, I almost think to myself where it's like I can't imagine. Well, I don't know. Anything's possible with thinking about that guy, the guy from Philadelphia, freaking out over the Princess Leia doll that his daughters came across in a store. Right. So people maybe the pendulum's swinging to a more conservative kind of parent. But I can't imagine any parent would be like, "Well, Timmy, you're 10 years old, but this is Star Wars is PG-13. We're not going. It's not this is not appropriate for you." So it's one of those things where I don't know if it carries enough weight where it would be a real concern for Disney to be like, I mean, I guess there was at one time Disney had to, when they finally came out with a PG movie, that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. It was like, and I was perfect in that, The Black Hole was one of their first live action, and Midnight Madness and The Watcher in the Woods and all these live action ones, which have some pretty freaky, scary things. So, if we talk of if rating inflation is kind of like money inflation, then I think this might be a PG-13 movie, unless Disney is concerned that it'll keep people away. But I don't think that's what they're worried about. I don't think they're worried that the rating is going to scare somebody off.
Yeah. It was just something I was thinking about because, all of the trailers and things that we've seen play up, like the tension with, Finn and the stormtroopers, the First Order troopers, and getting marched down a hallway in the prison, and
I mean, there's blood,
running away from explosions, and Kylo Ren with his lightsaber in the woods about to confront these people. It's nothing about it screams like, "Hey, this is a fun space adventure." Really, like, it plays up all this like tension and everything, which is fine. Like, I'm probably being too conservative or just unaware of like what I think 8 or 10-year-old kids can handle in a movie. But it just seeing the trailer, seeing how it's been marketed with like what we've seen of the movie, and then being like school supplies, like there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance for me.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, maybe there's going to be some conversations after these movies. I mean, there's blood on Finn's stormtrooper armor, even though it's a minuscule shot. But I watched one of those freeze frame 20-minute analysis of the second teaser.
Right.
Star Wars has a long storied history of people becoming dismembered.
Sure.
there's a flame trooper, which literally is like,
Yeah,
one of the great things about, not great things, but one of the things that existed because of the prequels that, to depict a war between, nondescript men inside armor versus robots. They never had to particularly, but, are they just going to be, what are they flaming with what are these flame troopers going to be flaming? Are they burning villages? Are they burning people? Are they,
Right.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting because it's like that whole thing where I keep thinking back to the Empire Strikes Back incident at my house with my nieces and quickly finding out that 1980 PG is just too intense for kids. To the point where it's like, it might be 2 years before I feel comfortable, showing that movie again. What I did is I sidestepped it. I just gave them the storybooks, and it's like, they'll just read the storybooks. They don't actually need to see the movies,
right?
But I don't. Yeah, if it's I don't know if it's going to be scary like that. I wouldn't take my nieces to something like that. They'll still be 5 and 3, almost 6 and 4. But if it's going to be if it's going to be a dark movie, I would probably either have to watch it first to vet it for them, or, I think kids are a little bit more, they might be more sophisticated, but they're also a little bit more sheltered. So if there's some kind of, if there's any smack of excessive violence, then it'll probably be PG-13. Or if they've got too much writing on this being a PG movie, they might have to go back and edit it. I mean, maybe that's the tweaking that, JJ says that it's an hour and 20, it's a 124 minute running time that he's got it down to right now. And maybe what they're arguing about is, over headbutts and how quickly someone's hand gets cut off or whatever,
Right. And what do you show when you cut off their hand?
Exactly. So, well, I think it looks like we pretty much covered everything we wanted to cover.
Covered a lot. We haven't covered everything that happened over the last couple of weeks because we didn't want to talk for 4 hours, but we'll get back to it next week.
As far as reaching out and connecting with us, which we love, because we're not getting a lot of letters or anything like that. We don't need love letters or anything like that. But you could email us at talkingbirdcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at talkingbirdcast on Twitter. You can we have a Tumblr, which I don't think has had a lot of updates recently because John's been busy, and that's
because I've been out of town, and also a lot of what we've been talking about doesn't have a lot of like visual things that we need to focus on. But
it's still it's at Talkingbird.
I'll get back to it.
TalkingBirdStarWars.tumblr.com. I created a Facebook page only because it's I thought we might need it. It's Facebook,
connecting with our fans out there.
Yeah, it's Facebook.com/Talking Bird Podcast, because I think Star Wars for some reason was taken, or I don't know what happened. Either maybe I created one months ago and I deleted it and forgot about it. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you can you know how to get a hold of us. We keep saying this.
Yeah,
send us a note. Tell us what you want to hear.
Drop us a line.
Tell us what you want to hear about. Please. Anyway, for Talking Birdcast, I want to thank you. I have been Robert Zachary.
I'm John Llewellyn.
And may the Force be with you.
You'll be a wife in the Star Wars, fighting with the rebel force. Time to be going on a journey across the stars. It's time to leave your boyhood on a spaceship you'll travel far. You'll be a warrior in the Star Wars. Message to Obi-Wan Kenobi. I wonder what do we have here? You'll be a warrior in the stars.